I finally made my boys some beds. Some of the features are curly maple with these walnut accents. I think they look really great. They're slightly different, which is great because eventually they probably won't be in the same room. Let me show you how I made them. We moved into this house about 2 years ago, and I'm ashamed to say my two boys have been sleeping on the floor the entire time we've been here. That also means that each time we needed to remake the boys' beds after doing laundry, it was a wrestling match on the floor that my wife and I lost each time we attempted it. We came away looking disheveled, almost beyond recognition. It had to stop. The boys were not sleeping on the floor, just on a mattress sitting on the floor. This doesn't necessarily hurt them, obviously. These are some comfy mattresses. But the fact that making the boys some beds has been on my list of things to do for so long, I had to finally do something about it. Oh, and Bandit the cat says hi. I'm about to load up and go to the lumber store. We've decided we're going with hard maple on this one. There are two categories of maple, basically soft maple and hard maple. They're both hardwoods. One is a little harder than the other, and it just kind of depends on the species of maple on which category they fall into. So let's go to the lumber yard. I was able to pick through the stack just a bit at the place where I get my lumber. It depends on the place you go as to how much you'll be allowed to do that, but mine lets me. I tried to grab boards with a consistently blonde coloration without many of the darker mineral stains that maple can have sometimes. That's just the look we were going for this project. This lumber was skip planed where they get off some of the roughness on two of the faces, but not all of it. You can also get it what they call fully dressed, which at this place was called S3S, so they had milled both sides to a finished milling on the large faces, and then they put a straight line rip on one edge. I think it cost 35 or 45 cents more per board foot, so if it's something you want to pay for, it might be worth it. I don't trust certain places. It's not just this place, but I would rather do some of the milling myself because I might be able to keep the wood a little bit thicker than if they did it. The bugs are getting me out here. I might be able to keep it a little bit thicker, but it's just something to consider when you're buying lumber. If you want to get an idea of how much lumber this is, you can kind of see I've got about 4 stacks there, not quite the full width of my truck. This is about 135 board feet. When you talk about board feet as a volume, this will kind of give you a little bit of an idea of what that amount of volume is. As the daylight slipped away, my wife and I laid out all of the boards and started to get an idea of what pieces we wanted to be which parts of the beds. Well, I got run inside by the daylight, or lack thereof, so I had to temporarily shift my workbench, stack it all up here, and I'll get back going on it tomorrow. My wife and I spent some time yesterday before it got totally dark looking at the grain on these and seeing which ones we wanted to be the sides, the rails that would show probably the most, because those are the longest boards that we need for these beds. So we marked it as rail, and we put a mark that gave us more than plenty length to have some extra to cut off of the rail as we go through and as I go through and process this. So I've got that. What I'm going to do is just transfer a line across there, and I'm actually just going to cut that. The good thing about that is it leaves enough material here for the widest part of our bed and headboard. So I can use these for 4 of the rails that we marked out, and I can still get a piece for the headboard or footboard or panels or whatever out of this piece because it's plenty wide. For the rest of this stock, most of them are 10-foot boards. The ceilings in my shop are only 9 feet tall, so I like to store most of my lumber vertically. It just seems to be working out well right now. So to be able to do that, I need to be able to cut some off of this. So what I think I'm going to do is cut the amount that could still be used for that width I was talking about, that would still be plenty wide for the headboard, footboard, or the panels of those that I'm using. And that way go ahead and make a cut there, and I can get all of these boards stood up over in the corner and out of the way, and they could still all be used for multiple parts in the rest of this project. The next day, I continued to find and label the different pieces I would need for the headboards, footboards, rails, etc., and rough cut them to length. I needed to get the panels glued up for the headboards and footboards. I took some time to lay them out the way I like them and labeled each side A and B in alternating fashion. This helps as you run them on the joiner. For edges labeled A, I would have that face toward me, toward the outside of the fence. For the edges labeled B, I would have that top face toward the fence. This helps cancel out any little bit that the joiner fence might be out of square. You'll get a better glue up if you'll do this. Sometimes I would take the board to the table saw and make the other side parallel before jointing the opposite edge.
Rivers run dry, dust spreads in the air. 2 dark days, do you have a tear to spare? Make a promise, the world awaits. It's heavy just breathing through this debate. We'll start come on, start a riot. When they love you too much, now it's fame, fake, or even. I tried to draw some kind of triangle or mark on the top of my panels when I get them exactly how they should be. That way, when I do the glue up, I know to just line those marks up and it'll be right. I don't have to think about it again when that time comes. Time to get these panels glued up. Bessie Tools was nice enough to send me a bunch of clamps to help me get this project done, so big thanks to them. All of the clamps that you see here, I will have links to them below. They are fantastic clamps. I don't do this for every glue up, but with these clamps being so fresh and clean, I wanted to keep them that way a little bit longer. I put down some painter's tape where the glue joints would be. The tape can be taken off so easily when you're done, and especially on parallel clamps, it helps them work better longer. You always want to make sure that you're putting clamping pressure from 2 different sides of a panel like this. That way you're not bowing it in any certain direction. Also, I tried to clean up most of the glue. These will get flattened later, but it'll just help not having to deal with as much of that glue on the surface. And here are the marks I was telling you about earlier. I got a little bit off when I glued these together, but they are oversized panels, so it'll be fine. On this first clamp, you can see I have not always been so careful with the glue, and there is a good bit on there. The footboard panels were then glued up exactly the same way, since I had some of my clamps available again. I wanted to keep these panels pretty much as thick as possible, so I used my Onefinity CNC to flatten them on one side before heading back to my friend's shop to use his wide belt sander. I just recently upgraded my Onefinity CNC to the larger Journeyman rail, giving me 48 inches of cutting area. If you haven't seen that video yet, go give it a watch. Since even the rough size of my panels was 44 inches wide, I could easily use the CNC to flatten them. My preferred method to do this could not be simpler. There is a gaming controller that is handheld. I don't even have to write any kind of program or get it to do an operation. I can literally jog this by hand and very quickly get one side truly flat. On the wide belt sander, we used a 60 grit belt, which was really aggressive and it chewed through the material fast. I knew I wanted to hand sand a lot of it up through the grits, so this was just fine to get the other side flat and all of them to an even thickness. I have the task that we all love so much, and that is sanding. I'm going to use my random orbit sander, start at 80 grit, and just work my way up through it. I'm obviously not going to show you all of that. I am an affiliate of Surf Prep, so if you happen to want to get a nice random orbit sander or any of the sanders that they have, I have a coupon code. Look at the link down in the description and check it out. What I'm doing here as I'm sanding is using a flashlight in a raking direction across the surface of the piece, and that way I'm able to see any imperfections that might still be there that I need to sand a little bit more. I had some particularly curly maple boards that I have been holding on to for just such a project as this. I'm gluing these together to become the posts and the frame of the headboards and footboards, and it'll make a little more sense later what I mean by frame. These are the slats that go underneath the mattress and give it support. You can find information online about how these should be spaced since there are some minimums and maximums. I spaced mine 2 inches apart. I ended up buying some faith frame material that is readily available at my lumber supplier. These are typically used for cabinets. This was also maple and it was very reasonably priced, so I went this route, rather than having to mill them all up myself. They sell them in 2.5 inch widths, fully dressed, so all I had to do was cut them to rough length and move on. After the frame pieces were dry, I took them, all of the slats, and the rail pieces back to get them all consistent at the wide belt sander. The frame pieces need to be the exact same thickness, so when I started cutting the slots in them, I could set it up once and do all of them at the same time. Using my track saw, I put one straight edge on each of the rail pieces. Then I ripped the other side parallel on the table saw. I'm leaving these a bit long for now, and I will cut them to final length later on in the project. Alright, these are your bed parts. So here's how your bed's gonna go. It'll have 2 posts like this on either side, like that. Can you picture it? Yep. And then mommy, grab one of those. It'll have that spanning across here, like that at the top, and also right here. I thought it would be cool if y'all would pick out the ones that you want. Alan already told me that these are the legs he wants. Remember? Yeah. So this is for the footboard. These are the legs. And then it'll also have crossboards that go like that.
I like this kind of light.
You do?
What is it?
It's maple, but this is quarter sawn. See all those cool ray flex? So you like these for your post?
Daddy, tell me guess how to spell my name.
I know how to spell your name.
Middle name. Just my middle name.
I named you that. So you pick something, like you said you liked these. Do you want those for your posts?
Yeah, I like these.
You like these for your posts?
Yep.
Okay. Some of these crazy curly ones like this to go with the curl. That probably makes sense. And that means this one is Allen for headboard. I have left all of my post pieces long on purpose so that I could cut them to final size basically at this moment. You want to be careful So I have a sheet showing all of the measurements that ideally I want things to line up to, but it's always a good idea to reference your actual pieces because you don't know where you're a little bit off, and that can compound as you go about cutting some of these. I would like to do one setup for the horizontal cuts right now and cut all of those pieces because I know that's what they're going to be. In order to find that, I am going to use my 2 vertical post pieces for the footboards. And then I'm going to just pull a measurement including these 2 to get to what I need as my overall width. To accomplish this, what I'm going to do is just use one of the headboards itself. I'm going to pull and mark where 40 3/4 is and put a piece of tape there so I can just mark that. Now what I can do is take my 2 posts for the footboard, line them up with the edge of this piece, and then I can actually just use my tape measure to see what that difference is. So now we can cut all of our horizontal pieces at 37 13/16. All right, here is the setup. I have a stop block here, and I have a 36-inch rip fence, but that is to where your measuring tool on here can read, and it's to cut between the blades. So I can't technically use that, but there is just enough room that my piece will fit here, go push through the cut, and it is exactly what I need to be. So I'm just gonna go through, make the rest of my horizontal pieces cut all the same, and we'll move on to the next step. It was going to be complicated enough keeping all of these parts straight, and then I went and complicated it even more by having the boys choose the parts they wanted. I was sure to do a ton of labeling on the parts as I went, so there was tape absolutely everywhere. In my notes, I have it that we want a 5-inch leg on here, so I'm going to mark up from the bottom 5 inches. That way I know where to post the horizontal piece, the cross member. And we can go from there. So that's what the footboard's gonna look like. Everything's coming together pretty well. Now that I have everything dry fit and set up, I have marked the inside right here of the leg post on both the top and bottom where I'm going to need to cut the dado. And the reason for this is I need to do a stopped dado, and I do not want it to show past this point. So when I set up my dado stack, I'm going to have to make a mark on my fence to be able to stop that at a certain point, and then I will just cut the tenon short so that it will fit in there and you won't see any kind of a gap coming out this way. Now it is time for some really good layout. I need to, since this is the face, I want my dado to start, my panel to start 3/8 inch down from the face. So I need to mark 3/8 down from here. Okay, and then I'm going to go 3/8 in the dado. I'm going to make a 3/8 wide dado. That's just going to give a little bit of a reveal. So what will happen is the panel will end up being right here. So you'll have this nice little lip, this reveal before the front of the actual leg post. I need to cut all 4 of the main posts for the headboard, and this is way too long to do it on the table saw. These need to be 49 inches long, and so what I'm going to do is just get them nice and lined up here on this end. I've already trimmed this end. Make sure they're perfectly lined up, and then we will clamp them down before moving them to the other side. so they're not in the way. This should work. Now that all the frame pieces and posts were cut to final length for the headboards, I could do the same amount of layout to make sure that I could go and put all of the grooves in all of the pieces. I've got the dado stacks set up here, and I just did a test piece to make sure I've got the right reveal off of the front before the dado starts, as well as how deep I want that groove to go. So I've got that all dialed in, and now I'm just gonna run all of my horizontal pieces because the dados can go all the way through. They don't have to be stop dados. Then I'll do the vertical ones that have the stop bits. Now I'm actually marking on the table saw fence the lines for the starting and stopping of my stopped dados. These will coincide with the lines of where the horizontal pieces meet these posts, and I will just need to pay very special attention to where I'm dropping this down onto the blade and where I'm stopping. For the stop dados, they were different from the left side and the right side, so after I finished all of one side of these posts, I erased those marks on my table saw fence and remarked it for the other side. I did make a mistake, however, and I will be covering that in the next part of this video. Thanks so much for watching part 1, and hopefully you'll check out part 2 where I show the mistakes that I made and how I corrected them, some more design work, and of course the final reveal. Bye.